But what you're here tonight to talk about is ALEC. About a year and a half ago, we were given 5,000 documents that related to the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. We got these documents, a group of organizations got them. They're kind of whistleblower documents. We started reading them, and we were starting to find out three things. First, we looked at their IRS filings, and they say in their IRS filings that they do zero, that is no, lobbying. That was the first thing that startled us. The second thing that startled us was reading those documents, we came up with what looks like lobbying, what sounds like lobbying, what acts like lobbying. I spent 12 years being lobbied. The same things that my constituents were doing, labor was doing, teachers were doing, businesses were doing. When I served in Congress, that's what ALEC does. But they claim to do no lobbying. We sent a letter on July 14th of last year to the IRS, 16 pages long, saying, looks like lobbying, here's a document, here's a document. The IRS did not respond, because we're just a common cause. But then one of my staff persons discovered that in 2006, the Congress passed a law that individuals, average ordinary citizens, could file a whistleblower suit when they discovered tax fraud. So, in the 1st of May, Bob, Edgar, and his wife Merle, as individuals, sent a large document, including 4,000 pages of these documents, to the IRS. And because that law was in place, the IRS is mandated to investigate ALEC and its tax issue. Last Thursday, Walmart got out of ALEC. Previously, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Kraft and others got out. Now, many of them got out because ALEC had come to the public's attention through the Stand Your Ground law introduced by the NRA in Florida and then spread across the country through ALEC. We then began to see other laws like the immigration law in Arizona spread across the country through ALEC. ALEC is made up of 2,000 state representatives, each of whom pays $100 for a 2-year membership. Okay? And corporations, about 130 to 40 corporations, pay anywhere from $7,000 to $25,000, and they take that off on their taxes as a charitable contribution, because ALEC is a charity, a 501c3. And some of those corporations, the big guys, had been giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay the way of the legislators to go several times a year to special workshops and academies and to share ideas. Now, ALEC is even more crazy. It has corporations on one hand and legislators on the other. There are 9 task forces, and nothing comes out of a task force unless it has approval from both the corporate side and the legislative side. So the corporations have that much power. Now, Common Cause, and you guys may feel differently, Common Cause thinks that if 2,000 state representatives want to get together and work on model bills, that's fine. But if they want to do it, they need to file properly. And if it's lobbying, they need to report it properly, and they need to report it in terms of their state laws. We found one state legislator in Florida who took an ALEC model bill and introduced it without taking the ALEC name off of it. And you're going to see more about ALEC. I told you we filed this whistleblower complaint. We didn't file it on our own. We went and found a law firm in San Francisco that specializes in whistleblower complaints. And they get hundreds of requests to do whistleblower complaints, and only take a couple. They say that our complaint is the strongest one that they've seen, because it clearly shows that all these corporations for more than 30 years, in an organization that was founded by Henry Hyde and Paul Weyrich 30-some years ago, was in fact, over the last 30 years, a hardcore lobbying operation, but done through a charitable structure. There's a whole bunch of groups that are out there. I have to say, one of the reasons Common Cause is so mad at them is that they've been working really hard to suppress the vote. They've been working really hard, and you know it here in Missouri, to pass ID laws so that poor people and elderly people don't have access to voting. In other states, they're working hard to do away with early voting, with same-day registration. I'm an unusual person. I think every baby born in the United States should be registered to vote at birth. We give every baby born in the United States a Social Security number. Why isn't that enough? You know, you saw all that stuff with Acorn a few years ago. There is no such thing as registration fraud. The fraud is that we don't have 80 and 90% of our people voting. There isn't even voter fraud. Colbert did a great thing of looking at voter fraud in Ohio. He discovered there are 9 million voters in Ohio, and he found voter fraud. 0.00009% of the voters were fraudulent. There were 9 fraudulent votes out of the 9 million. The fraud is that we make it too hard to register, and we don't encourage comprehensive groups in voting. I've got other crazy ideas. I think every 18-year-old, when they're at age to vote, should have a ceremony at their school or their veterans hall, or maybe even here in the Ethical Society. Give them a flag, a constitution, and the same ceremony we give immigrants, and give them a certificate to vote, and let's encourage voting so people vote. ALEC is trying to suppress the vote. Why would any political view, whether you're conservative, moderate, or liberal, want to suppress the vote? Why wouldn't you want everyone to have access to voting? Well, I've talked too long, but I wanted to suggest that this is the most dangerous moment in American history for democracy. You are the leaders we've been waiting for. My wife, who is a retired operating room nurse, says she'll believe that corporations are people the day after they have a colonoscopy. And I can't believe that the founding fathers were sitting around the table saying money is speech. I think they thought people ought to have access to speech, that speech was important, but I think they also realized that money can stifle speech. Money can cut out a voice. So it's up to us. As Don said, we are in fact the ones that have to take back democracy. We've got some people in the audience who've been working on Occupy movement across the country. One of the differences between the Common Cause of John Gardner's day, 1970, and today is in the 1970s, you and I were all joining organizations to fix problems. People aren't joining Common Cause now. What they're joining is the good government movement. We're not having membership as the core issue. We're having movement. And I want the Occupy guys to switch and become, let's occupy democracy. Let's take democracy back. Let's elect public officials who serve the public interest and not the special interest. I have 2 more things really to do. How many minutes have I talked? How many? 40. 40. I have 5 left. Let me use 3.5 of those. I want to use 2 illustrations which I think could be helpful. The first, I want to quote President Obama. And I want to quote President Obama where he spoke at the memorial service after the shooting of Gabby Gibbard. He focused his comments on the little girl who had come to hear her congresswoman speak. Her name was Christina Taylor Greene. Listen to what President Obama said. That's what I believe, in part because that's what a child like Christina Taylor Greene believed. Imagine. Here was a young girl who was just becoming aware of our democracy, just beginning to understand the obligations of citizenship, just starting to glimpse the fact that someday she too might play a part in shaping her nation's future. She had been elected to her student council. She saw public service as something exciting, something hopeful. She was off to meet her congresswoman, someone she was sure was good and important and might be a role model. She saw all of this through the eyes of a child, undimmed by cynicism or vitriol that we adults all too often just take for granted. I want us to live up to her expectations. I want our democracy to be as good as she imagined it. All of us, we should do everything we can to make sure this country lives up to that child's expectations. And my words to close, I think it's time for all of us, particularly you guys in St. Louis, to unload your guns and reload your brains, to invest in public education and civic culture, to banish hate from our hearts and hate speech from our mouths, to learn to love our neighbors even when our neighbors are elected public officials, regardless of party or ideology, and always remember that we are the leaders we've been waiting for.